Let's talk about the climate versus the weather. You know how I always say the only thing you can talk about in a narcissistic relationship is the weather? Well, this video is going to connect weather and narcissistic relationships in a way you may not expect. Now, I'm sure most of you know what I'm about to say, but since the news is such crap these days, let's just do a quick refresher, and I'm going to own it. I'm not a meteorologist, so if I am getting this wrong, if any of you are meteorologists, please correct me. I'm open to it. I know what I know, and I know what I don't know. Now, when we talk about issues around climate change, for example, the planet and the oceans warming and the ice caps melting, there's a fair number of people who say that's not true, because when it was January, and there was a big snowstorm, so go shove your global warming up your butt kind of thing. They're not quite getting it. Climate is a word that describes the consistent, predictable trends around temperature, precipitation, and seasonal change of a region, right? I live in Southern California, where we have a Mediterranean climate, right? Very specific kind of rain and seasons, and, kind of a very temperature kind of stays pretty consistent. I have lots of friends who live in New England, which has what's called a humid continental climate. Southern India, where I have family, has a tropical climate. And that tells us how you can expect the climate and the conditions to be there. But then there's a phenomenon called weather. I'm looking out my window today. It is overcast and 86 degrees, which is 30 degrees Celsius. Yesterday, it was sunny and 96 degrees, which is 36 Celsius. And in a few months, we can expect that it might be rainy on a couple of days and 65 degrees, which is 18 Celsius. Those are all very different types of weather. But the climate, Mediterranean, remains the same. Just because it's cold in January doesn't mean the climate isn't getting warmer. Well, now let's bridge this into narcissistic relationships. This isn't a weather channel, okay? The mistake lots of people in narcissistic relationships make is that you focus on the weather instead of the climate. You're thinking, oh, it's sunny today and it's 85 degrees. Great. Like, wait a minute. Now it's a hailstorm with thunder, lightning, and flooding. Tomorrow it may be sunny and 72. And in 3 weeks, there may be a hurricane with 100-mile-per-hour winds and people die. The climate, for example, in New England, all of this could happen, even in a relatively brief period of time. The climate remained consistent. It's still the humid continental climate. But that weather, the rain, the hurricane, the hailstorm, the sunny day, that jumps around. Now that jumping around, that weather, often underlies this. It's almost consistent with what we think of the trauma bond and the confusion. In a narcissistic relationship, it's not a hailstorm, a blizzard, or a hurricane every day, nor is it a sunny day every day. But let's face it, some climates are more livable than others for different people. Personally, as a person who lives in a Mediterranean climate, I gotta tell you, it's a pretty agreeable one. It's never really cold. And depending on where you live in one of these climates, it can get hot, but sometimes in some parts of a Mediterranean climate, not even terribly so. It rains sometimes, not enough. It's usually sunny. Though, interestingly and quite tragically, as the climate shifts, we're seeing less rain and more fires in these Mediterranean climates. A Mediterranean climate is like an agreeable climate. Easy to live in, easy to be in, and yeah, there might be some icky days that are too hot or too rainy. It's usually easy. Some climates, like that humid continental climate in New England, like you get in the northeastern part of the United States, you can get some nice seasons. You get cold, often pretty bad winters. You get hot, humid summers that can be uncomfortable. You get beautiful autumns. You get a mixed bag in the spring. Now, this can be a little bit more challenging for some people. Some people love it, but a lot of people are like, oh, those winters are too much. Here's the bottom line. Even though it feels like the weather's jumping up and down, climate is predictable. February in Boston is never going to be 80 degrees for a week. Now, you know that there may not be a blizzard every day, but it will be cold. The climate is the general trend. I'm going to keep putting a fine point on this. Once again, the mistake that we make in narcissistic relationships is that we focus too much on the weather in the relationship. So when the bad weather comes through, as it were, we'll say, oh, it can't be that bad. We just had 3 sunny days. No. If you live in a rainy climate, it's going to rain. And soon. It's going to rain very soon. Those sunny days don't mean that the climate has now turned into a warm, sunny, dry climate. Climate's the climate, and it's predictable. The climate of a narcissistic relationship over time is invalidation, manipulation, egregious selfishness, betrayal, entitlement, anger, passive aggression, gaslighting, all of that stuff together. That's pretty much the climate of a narcissistic relationship. You can count on it. Are there going to be some days when the weather's different, when this doesn't happen? Hell yes. Days when the narcissistic person, I don't know, maybe they're having a good run at work and so now they're in a good mood, or they're content with where they're at, or somebody flirted with them in the hardware store. Or maybe you're in the love bombing stage of the relationship, so it may feel like you are living in a sunny dreamland. Climate is the trend. It's a sort of proverbial long game. Weather is the flash in the pan. Listen, just to be contrarian, I can tell you this could play out another way. The climate in a relationship, and not a narcissistic relationship, but in a healthy relationship, may be respectful, loving, kind, compassionate, safe. And in this loving relationship, maybe the person, your partner, loses their job and their best friend dies the same day. And then a day or two after that, they're really short with you, or not nice, or they ignore you. And then they apologize for their behavior and they don't do it again. The climate remains the climate. They're a nice, respectful, kind person. But the weather, the rainy, stormy day, them, sort of snapping at you or getting angry or ignoring you, that also came and went. But if you ended the relationship on the basis of that bad day or that bad week of them isolating or being angry and didn't account for the consistent climate, which is usually very good, you'd be missing something there too, wouldn't you? But people who are in narcissistic relationships are always talking themselves out of the climate, which is what could only, I gotta tell you, the climate of a narcissistic relationship, I guess we could call that a bleak, dark, and toxic climate. Because sometimes the weather is nice in a narcissistic relationship. I've heard this a million times. Oh, Dr. Ramani, it's not that bleak. We went out to dinner. It's not that toxic. He bought me a present, or he took the kids so I could go see my friends. It's not that dark. My mom told me that my pumpkin pie turned out great. Okay. Remember, not only do the narcissistic people breadcrumb us, we sort of breadcrumb ourselves. And one sunny day that's warm in the wintertime in Cape Cod can trick us into thinking that we are living in Santa Barbara. But nope, the climate is the climate. Before you can blink your eye, it's going to be a very, very cold day in Cape Cod. The climate issue is so important when it comes to the decision making that we make in narcissistic relationships. Interestingly, the example that I gave earlier in this video of the good relationship that has a couple of bad days when something bad is happening, a person's had losses or whatever. Interestingly, more people might actually jump ship out of a good relationship despite the good climate, while in a narcissistic relationship, they may ignore the terrible climate and use those occasional days of weather, good weather, to rationalize staying in the terrible climate of the narcissistic relationship. Believe it or not, it makes sense. It's almost paradoxical. But in a healthy relationship, we are not chronically blaming ourselves so we can stay attached. So when something goes wrong in a healthy relationship, we may be much more quick to say, whoa, this person's acting like a jerk. In a narcissistic relationship, we are chronically blaming ourselves because the weather is always changing. It's toxic and stormy one day, normal in the afternoon, toxic and stormy again, a few weeks of normal, a really awful day of betrayal. And because we are always A, being blamed in these relationships, B, being gaslighted, C, confused, D, other people don't see it, and E, we may have a history of these relationships. Then all of a sudden this kind of climate, not even that all of a sudden, this kind of climate feels sort of normal. Well, then we blame ourselves. So that one day of good weather is enough for us to say, see, it was my fault. And they're great. The climate's great. The trauma bond happens because, in essence, we focus on the weather and not the climate. And this is why people in narcissistic relationships should not talk to people who are in healthy relationships to get advice. Healthy people in healthy relationships talk lots of what feels like nonsense about boundaries and gratitude and date nights and communication and compromise and stuff that works for them. Trust me, you are living in very different climates. I have worked with and talked with, frankly, thousands of survivors of narcissistic relationships at this point. And the theme that always emerges is that I hear, hey, Dr. Ramani, I'm wondering if I'm the problem. I mean, they did empty the dishwasher last Wednesday without being asked. And they did once send me some nice, really nice texts, like over 5 days. And in 2010, they came to my friend's funeral and they even paid for their own flight and everything. Okay. And these folks who are in relationships like this, and it may be you may somehow mentally misplace the numerous betrayals, rages, passive aggressions, active aggressions, tantrums, lies, manipulations, selfish decisions, entitled behavior. The climate gets forgotten for the weather. And I tend to take a bit of a hardline stance. I know not everyone likes it, but I do. What if we flip the paradigm and evaluate this relationship from the point of view of what the usual days and weeks are like over time, the true climate? Would you ever want a friend to stay in that kind of relationship, a narcissistic relationship? No. So while you may be willing to overlook the climate for the weather for yourself, you probably wouldn't do that for someone else. Listen, in our toxic positivity culture, it's all about second chances and see the light in other people, and they don't mean it when they're mean, and that's just their wound talking, and forgive everyone. But when we do this, we again blame people who are being harmed. Climate is really data over time, and paying attention to the climate means seeing this narcissistic relationship for what it really is. Not a few sunny days and some love-bombed 75-degree rainbow-filled days, but rather a very ghastly climate that, like all climates in the world, sometimes has surprising and unexpected and lovely weather thrown in. So, do a climate assessment of your narcissistic relationship and ask yourself if you really want to live in this kind of climate. And if you have to stay in the relationship, at least now, make sure you have the right clothes for it. And remind yourself, if there is a sunny day in this not very great climate, enjoy it. But don't, as I always say, don't burn your umbrellas, because the climate still sucks. And you're going to need that umbrella. Good luck and thanks.